We will be waiting for another 2-3 minutes. Let more learners join, then we will start. This session is for business communication, that is MMPC 007. Okay, welcome back. I'm audible to you now.
Yes, sir.
So this is the session, as I said, is for business communication, MMPC 007, and we will be starting with block one, which consists of 3 units. And block one is introduction to communication. Unit one is related to basics of communication. Unit two is process of communication, and unit three is types of communication. So we will start with basics of communication. That is introduction to communication. Communication is one of the most essential skills, and it is very important to understand the purpose of communication. Communication is important in an organization. While working in a business enterprise, we interact with superiors, co-workers, and subordinates, and converse one-on-one or over the intercom or phone, and read and write emails, letters, business reports, and proposals. All these activities have one thing in common, that is sharing of information. No business enterprise or organization can function without communication. Communication is at the center of all business activities. Better our communication skills, the greater our chances of success. You might remember, I don't know how many of you are working, why an interview is conducted. What to see? Normally, in an advertisement, only the qualification and work experience is written, and those who fulfill it, they apply. And after you have applied, then after scrutiny, your CVs, you are called for an interview. That is, they want to see only how you communicate, irrespective of the department you are being called for. Concept depends upon the communication skills, what you have. Now, the thing is that how this communication started, that is, evolution of communication. Communication is a way to interact with others. It is an integral part of our lives. A proper communication results in proper understanding. Communication techniques have evolved over the years or say ages and are a continuous process. Communication is a process which involves exchange of interaction or relaying an expression with the help of words or signs. It is very important to communicate effectively so as to convey the message clearly. There are different types of communication. For example, verbal and non-verbal. We will now learn how the communication in its present form evolved. Started from cave painting. One of the oldest methods of communication is cave painting. Cave paintings are just not paintings. Instead, they conveyed a specific message, like making the territories, recording major events, etc. Then comes communication through symbols. First one was smoke signals. In early ages, people depended on elements to communicate. Smoke signals were one of the form of to transmit a message. Then came, you might have heard, carrier pigeons. This was one of the popular method of sending the written message to the pigeons, who became a carrier of the message. Then comes with the evolution of time. Then came postal system. During ancient time, Egyptians used the courier service to send the official orders. India, China, Rome, and Persia too had an organized postal system. The first mailbox system was delivered of paid envelopes, was started way back in 1653 in Paris. Then came the print media. First printing press was developed by Germans in 1440, and it brought a radical change in the communication process. In the 16th century, newspaper came into existence. Then came radio. After the print communication technique took a new turn and wireless power evolved as one of the forms to transmit message. Radio broadcasting started in 1893. As the time passed, people thought in different way. Then came telegraph. Telegraph communication was a revolution in long distance communication. Morse code was developed by Samuel Morse, which was a series of clicks, tones, and lights to transmit the message. And the first telegraphic message was sent in 1844. Then, after that, came telephone. The invention of telephone became a major form of verbal communication. Until date, it is the most reliable form of communication. Television. Then came television, which, like telephone, is an integral part of our lives. Television is a mode of indirect communication. What is meant by indirect communication? You will only see, you can't speak. That means whatever you want to communicate, it won't be sent to the system. You have to simply see or you have to simply listen. Then came internet. In 1950, we saw the emergence of computers, which now has become the major source of communication. This saw the technology penetrating considerably in the communication process. The year 1973 saw the emergence of term internet, which is now the most used term. Then came email. Emails or the electronic mails have now become an integral form of communication in the personal as well as professional lives. Text message. Text message are another mode of communication which is short and fast and uses a data network. Social media. This is the latest mode of communication and has digitized the world. The use of social media platforms has brought our world closer. During the pandemic, this has been one of the most popular modes to transmit message. You all are aware of what we are talking about. Nothing new as such, but you should be aware of how it started and now what is its importance. Now comes elements of communication. First of all, we will define communication. Communication as a word has been derived from the Latin word communicatio, tinus, which means to share. To define communication, it has been said that it is an act of purposefully and actively exchanging information between two or more people to send or receive a message through a shared system of signs and symbols. What we are doing right now. This is the practical example of what I have told. The basic elements of communication are the source, the message, channel, receiver, environment, context, and interference. These all seven things, you are a part of it right now. Now, what is the difference between journal and business communication? As far as the name suggests, first of all, we will start with the format. As far as business communication is concerned, it has a specific format for communication. Now the question arises, what is meant by that? When you were admitted to the program, an official mail came to you. That is a formal communication sent by the university authorities that your admission with the following details has been confirmed and welcome to IGNOU. Something sort of this. That is a formal, that is a specific format for the communication, and it has to be sent to all learners who join IGNOU. As far as your general communication is concerned, general communication does not have any fixed format. It has varied format. As far as category is concerned, no doubt a formal language has to be used in business communication. And in general communication, a personal touch is there. Now, the extent of reach. Business communication is usually practical and unbiased, whereas your general communication can be vast and can be fictitious and biased at times. As far as your demonstration and presentation is concerned, business communication specifically follows the norms and procedures of the organization, whereas in general communication, it is informal and it is different method or any method can be used for the communication. Aim. It focuses on the aim of the organization. But as far as general communication is concerned, so it does not have any aim as such. Kind and nature of pattern. No doubt, as I told you, a formal thing is a formal, that means a particular format has to be followed. But in general communication, it has a personal touch. Feedback, business communication requires feedback. But your general communication doesn't need a feedback. It's not mandatory. Then comes what is the purpose of business communication? Business communication plays a key role in a business enterprise or industry. All managerial or administrative activities involve communication, be it planning, organizing, recruiting, coordinating, or decision making. Communication serves as a means to measure the success or growth of an organization. Participation in the communication process involves developing skills in collecting and organizing information, analyzing and evaluating, appreciating the difference between facts and inferences, and communicating effectively. The purpose of communication may be to inform, persuade, or motivate a desired action. Therefore, the measure of communication effectiveness depends on the extent to which the final goal is achieved. Use of proper language. One of the very basic dimensions of effective communication is the knowledge and use of proper language for a specific purpose. Just as communication is always purposive, language is also purposive. Therefore, we have to study the relation between language and the purpose of its use. The purpose can be inform, to persuade, to create, or to argue. One can use language by combining some of these purposes. One can inform as well as persuade. The effectiveness of communication depends upon the kind of personality that communicates. When a communicator chooses certain words, an organization of words, and not others. He or she projects a personality with a particular center of concern and relation to the person he is addressing. You might have seen, but the thing is that I'm not aware of how many of you are working normally when you reach office. So you are basically greeted by some of your juniors, some of your seniors, or some of your colleagues, those who are working with you. What does that mean? Why that is there? Such dramatization in language is known as style. Everyone has his own style. This is basically good morning is good morning, but good morning can be said in any tone. When you are saying it to your superior, then you take care of the words or the presentation. But when you are saying the same thing to your colleague, so it can be a formal or it can be of any nature. The speaker or writer, according to his personality, chooses his style of verbal and non-verbal communication to purposefully establish a particular center of interest and relationship with his or her audience. Seven C's of communication. That is, this is the basic foundation of communication. In the business world, effective communication is the key to success. And effective communication is applicable to both oral as well as written communication. It is therefore very important to understand seven C's of communication will help in conveying important message effectively, in turn increasing employee engagement and productivity. Now you have to remember these seven C's. First one is clarity. Second one is correctness. Third one is conciseness. Fourth is courtesy. Fifth, concreteness. Sixth, consideration. And seventh is completeness. These words have been, you have heard all these words, and you basically are aware of to what is the importance of this word. These words are in communication. If it starts with clarity,
Sir, please share screen. Hi, sir.
okay, now it's visible. You can see the
Yes, sir.
slide. Okay, now here are the seven C's. What we are talking about: clarity, correctness, conciseness, courtesy, concreteness, consideration, and
Considering
completeness.
completeness.
As as I said, you are aware of the meanings of these words. And now the thing is that how they are related to communication. Clarity.
This
This
means
means
that a specific
I
message has been sent
please
instead trying to send to me. Message a particular time involves use of send.
clarity. This means that a specific message has been sent instead of trying to send too many messages at one particular time. This involves use of simple and precise service. The following are the features of clarity: clear understanding, clarity of thoughts and ideas, use of simple, appropriate, and precise words. Second one is correctness, use of correct language, grammar, data, etc. is very important to communicate the message clearly. The features of correctness are timely, exact, and correct message. Secondly, it is confidence booster. And thirdly, it has greater impact on the audience. Third one is conciseness. This means communicating using minimum but appropriate words. It has the following features: time saving, avoid excessive usage of unnecessary words, short and limited, appealing and comprehensible, and non repeatable. Even you might have felt then while you are writing in your Word document. If the word is repeated, so it itself says delete the repeated word. So that is, words should not be repeated again and again. Fourth one is courtesy. This is one of the important C's of communication, as it shows the respect, politeness, judicious behavior to the other party, in turn creating goodwill. It has the following features: consideration of the feeling of the audience, positiveness, and focus. And the third one is unbiased. Fifth one is concreteness. As the term suggests, it is specific, meaningful, and clear, and avoids ambiguity and double meaning. This has the following features: supports facts and figures, clear and precise, and avoid misinterpretation. Sixth one is consider. This implies that the audience is taken into consideration in terms of his or her viewpoints, culture, mindset, values, etc. The features of this are stresses on you approach, empathetic and optimistic. The seventh one is completeness. The last C of communication is completeness. As the term suggests, it means that any communication, be it personal or professional, should be complete. It should deliver all the facts and information required to send the message to the receiver. It has the following features: builds reputation of the organization, cost saving, removes the barrier of vague information, and helps in better decision making. Thus, from seven C's of communication, it is quite clear that the communication is one of the most initial
Sir, you are not audible.
Is the presenter there? I can't hear anything.
Is the screen visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now we will be moving to Unit 2, that is processes of communication. As we know that communication is one of the most integral parts of any individual or an organization. There is a specific way to communicate effectively. Therefore, it is important for us to understand the process of human communication so as to avoid the common errors which takes place in a communication. Linear concept of communication. The following five fundamental questions are asked in early stage of communication. Who says, what is said, where is it said, to whom it is said, and with what effect it is said. The transmission of information to be a one-way communication. A receiver passively receives the message and acts as directed or requested by the sender. According to the linear perspective, communication is to manipulate or convey signals through the medium chosen by the sender. Now you can see the linear way. Sender, message, it will move through the media. From the media, it will again send, it will be received by the receiver, and after receiver gets the message, he or she will take the action. So this is the linear way. That means communication is in the one direction only. Shannon-Weaver model of communication. The concept is predicated on the notion that communication takes place only after the message has been received, and that is, it should be received as intact as possible. Of course, this is the theoretical notion of perfect communication, but in real life, filters in both the sender's and receiver's mind influence the meaning of the message. Feedback, to some extent, corrects any distortions and tends to complete the communication cycle. The concept is very clear. We normally collect information from different sources of communication, but without applying ourselves. We presume that what we heard is correct or what has been told to you is correct. It's not always correct. That means it has been modified, and if it is modified, it has been distorted. And in terms of communication, as you can see in the diagram, there is a word written noise. Noise means what? It has been distorted, the information has been distorted, and as you are aware that there are n number of softwares and different things are there which normally sometimes guide, sometimes misguide. Everything in this world is possible right now. Whatever you want to actually want to see, it's not sure if whatever is shown to you or whatever is being told to you is correct. For correctness, you have to apply yourself and you have to yourself analyze how to use that information what has been communicated to you. Going back to the system, you can see that there is an information source. Encoding process, encoding where it is done in your mind. Then you start speaking, that is the channel. Decoding process, person who is listening. Then the listener's minds decode the message. Interpretation is done by your mind, and then destination comes. You react. This is, and in between you can see that there is a reverse direction from decoding to channel and from encoding to channel. That is creation of noise. And from destination you get the dotted, see the diagram, it is by connected by dotted line. That is your feedback. This is the simplest model of communication. Channel Weaver model did not consider feedback to be an essential component, since it was communication as a linear process and feedback as a separate act of communication. Therefore, in Channel Weaver's model, a dotted line is used to represent feedback. Now, source of information, that is ideation. Ideation means generation of idea. The information source is the first step in the communication process. The sender sent, has some unprocessed data. His or her goal is to turn the data into message and can be shared. The information source of the communication process is the source of the message. Now see process of communication. Source 1 is that creates the message. Source 2 selects the channel. किस message किस source से आपको send करना है. Third one is send the message. Fourth one is receiver gets message. Fifth one is filters it. Experience, knowledge, feelings. Then sixth one is interpretation. And then comes the feedback. Normally what we do, if we talk about you as university and me, there are three people involved in a single process, that is education. You were admitted by the university. That information was conveyed to all that you had been admitted. Then different sort of processes what the university has were performed, and whatever they were doing, they were informing you. Then came the time of teaching you. It was the communication was sent to me. I accepted. Then I replied to the university. University informed that information to you through different sources. And once the communication was communicated to you, now it is a direct interaction between you and me because I am the service provider and you are the service getter. If there is any communication gap between you and the university system, then it will be a lapse and it won't be a perfect communication between the university and the learners. That is why you can understand how important it is for you as well as for us to be in touch, and we should communicate the correct information and you should interpret it correctly. This is whole process of communication. Encoding. The sender composes the message after giving in some thought, verbal symbols, or any other symbolic form of expression. Encoding is the term for this procedure. Channel of communication. A channel is a suitable medium for sending a message, such as orally, in writing, electronically, in code, or via a signal system. Decoding. This involves receiving, comprehending, and interpreting the message. This is how a recipient receives the message. Acting. The communication process comes to a close when the receiver acts at an on an interpreted message, just the sender intended. We can observe that communication completes a full circle, bringing the sender and receiver together as two sides of the same coin. Modern masters consider communication to be a vital ability for successful managers because of its uniting process and role. Noise. This mechanism is susceptible to noise, which can obstruct or distort communication, preventing the message from being sent from the transmitter to the receiver. Noise, according to certain communication theorists, refers to extrinsic disturbance in the physical environment around the act of communication, such as poor audio quality, phone dropouts, bad printouts, or unreadable writing. You have heard the word filter. Now, what is that? Filters are responsible for communicating distortion induced by subjective elements, such as the sender's and receiver's attitude. They are psychological in nature. Attitudes, beliefs, experience, self awareness, and the ability to think coherently are among them. Two-way communication. Ours is a two-way communication. Whatever you want to ask me, you can ask me. It's not that it's a live interaction between you and me. This is a better and the best example of two-way communication process. Communication is now viewed as a two-way process in later conceptualization of the process. The receiver also serves as a sender of feedback to the transmitter to complete the communication cycle. As in telemarketing or call center communication, both the sender and the recipient play a reciprocal and reversal role. The two-way approach is more modern. It views communication as primarily a reciprocal process involving the exchange of messages. Because the sender, the source, and the receiver, are often the same individual, there is no clear separation between the two positions. Now you can see a two-way communication flow. Receiver, message, transmitter, communication symbol, communication channel, and it's coming back. What are the barriers in communication? In any type of communication process, there are certain barriers which needs to be understood so that they can be removed or avoided to make the communication process effective. A barrier works like a sieve, allowing just a portion of the message to get through, preventing the intended reaction. Communication obstacles arise even when we have the greatest of the intentions and our written and spoken messages are misconstrued. These sort of obstacles can be categorized as interpersonal, intrapersonal, and organizational. These are the barriers. Interpersonal barriers. Because of variance in views, experiences, education, culture, and personality, each individual is unique. As our thinking differs, we perceive the same information in various ways. These distinctions are due to the inherent or intrapersonal obstacles. The common cause that leads to these intrapersonal barriers are wrong assumption, varied perception, differing background, wrong inferences, block categories, and categorical thinking. Had you ever experienced these things in your personal life? The most important thing is how you speak. How you speak means how you communicate. How do you, and after one has to be a good listener. That is not required that you should speak always. It's better to have a good, to become a good listener so that you can apply, you can understand what has been told to you and what is being discussed. So I just want your opinion. How many of you have experienced these barriers? Barriers are written in front of you. Wrong assumptions, varied perceptions, differing background, wrong inferences, block categories, and categorical thinking. I hope every one of us, not all of us, but every one of us have experienced this and have managed it also. Wrong assumptions. To strengthen your skill as a communicator, try to put yourself in the shoes of the listener. This exercise will prevent making wrong assumptions about the receiver. Sometimes we used to say, उसने ऐसा कहा था, उसने कहा था ना, but what is your opinion? वो गलत हो सकता है तो आपने भी वही गलती की. Varied perception, वो उसकी thinking थी. Individual in an organization also perceive the same situation in different ways. It is all a matter of perception. The best way to overcome this barrier is to step back and take a wider, unbiased perspective of the issue. Differing backgrounds. It is important to understand the audience background in order to improve communication abilities. This information may accordingly be used to construct the message. The language understood by the receiver should be used to avoid ambiguity and reduce multiple meanings. Wrong inferences. Because inferences are more dramatic than facts, they might give more opportunities for gossips and rumors to spread. It is critical that inferences be backed by facts when professionals evaluate material, solve problems, and design processes. Block categories. Communication and other technologies are advancing so rapidly that many people find it difficult to quickly adapt themselves to these developments. Instead of taking advantage of these developments, which help in expediting the communication process, such people tend to resist and criticize them, when, which is a result of having a closed mind. Why don't you accept? Why don't you do it? Earlier, we used to say that it's difficult, education cannot be provided in online mode. No doubt it is being provided to all of you in online mode only. The same way, the difference is now. In this mode of communication, the difference is we can interact with you. We can try to solve the problems what you are facing. The only reason is a two-way communication. The use of terms like all, always, everybody, everything, every time, and their opposites like none, never, nobody, and nothing is a hint to recognizing this barrier in ourselves and others. We used to say, मेरे अलावा तो ये कोई भी नहीं कर सकता. How? Who are you? You would try to think of just conveying this message in a different I can do or I will try to do. There is a difference. If a message contains too many of these words, then there is a fair chance of communications getting distorted. To avoid this barrier, substitute these words with the phrases like, in most situations, or most likely. Use terms like, it appears to me with, just communicate that you are thinking of that way, or the evidence shows, to label your viewpoints. The concept changes. Then comes interpersonal barriers. Interpersonal barriers are caused by an individual's attitude or habits, whereas interpersonal barriers are caused by the limited communication ability of either coder, decoder, or both. Simple thing is that I said the glass is half filled, and without listening to me, you said you thought glass is half empty. This will create a mess because I'm saying I'm correct and you are saying you are correct. But both of us are correct at our place. But it's our thinking that both of us are correct. The thing is that we should have a common platform to understand. In a business environment, we neither attempt to change these traits nor we can do so. However, we can try and understand how differences in individuals' traits cause communication gaps. The most common cause of interpersonal barriers are limited vocabulary, incompatibility of verbal and non-verbal message, emotional outburst, communication selectivity, cultural variations, poor listening skills, and noise in the channel. Limited vocabulary means what? Inadequate vocabulary can be a big communication barrier. We occasionally find ourselves looking for the perfect word or phrase that best expresses what we want to say. If we fumble for words during a speech, it will leave a poor impression on the audience. On the other hand, having a large and broad vocabulary can help us to make an impression to our learners or listeners. Incompatibility of verbal and non-verbal message. Non-verbal cues provide a deeper insight into a sender's message. Ignoring and misinterpreting non-verbal cues might lead to a message being entirely misinterpreted. As a result, not only should one strive to read others' non-verbal cues, but one should also be mindful of one's own body language. One can follow certain guidelines to improve the physical appearance to give a strong impression, and these can be dress appropriately for the event, keep your clothing tidy and clean, choose a suitable hairstyle, and wear clean and polished shoes. I hope you all are aware of what I'm saying. We do it. Then comes your emotional outburst. Emotions are an integral part of our being, whether in business or personal encounters. By sharpening self awareness, intention, and empathy, emotions can help in developing an environment that is highly conducive to good communication. Situations do arise where people react negatively, depending on their nature and the situation. This negative reaction can be classified as hostile or defensive. Both reactions occur when the receiver of the message perceives some kind of threat. It is important to maintain one's composure in all kinds of the communication or situations. Viewing issues from different perspectives helps develop objectivity and rational thinking, which in turn can eliminate many of the causes of hostility or defensiveness. Communication selectivity. Communication selectivity is a barrier imposed by the recipient in a communication process where he or she pays attention to only a portion of the message. This happens because he or she is interested only in part of the message, which may be of use to him or her. In this case, the sender is not to blame. The receiver is the one who interprets the flow of communication. Sometimes what you used to, मैंने तो वो देखा ही नहीं, वो था वहां पर, दूसरा कहता है वो था वहां पर. This is what. Whatever you see it completely. Whatever you listen completely. Before interpreting or before reacting, sometimes your body language plays a role. Cultural variations. This is one of the most predominant interpersonal factors contributing to communication failure. As businesses are crossing national borders to compete on a global scale, the outlook of the global and domestic workforce has changed drastically. European, Asian, and American firms have expanded their businesses worldwide to create international ties through partnership, collaboration, or affiliation. To compete successfully in such a business environment, one must overcome the communication inadequacy arising due to different language and cultures. Poor listening skill. All of us, all human beings, rather, I should say that all human beings suffer from this problem, and it should be taken care of. Poor listening habits are a frequent communication barrier. It is important to keep in mind that listening and hearing are not the same thing. Hearing is a passive activity, whereas listening involves deliberate attention and correct decoding of the speaker's information. Misunderstanding and disputes can be avoided if individuals pay close attention to the message. Sometimes an individual is so engrossed in his or her thought and worries that he or she is unable to concentrate on listening. If a superior goes on shifting the papers, his or her desk while listening to his or her subordinate without making eye contact with the latter, he or she pays diligent attention to the speaker's message. Noise in the channel. This noise is basically any undesirable signal that obstructs communication is referred to as noise. It is not restricted to aural disruption, but may also take the shape of visual, audiovisual, textual, bodily, or psychological manifestations. Each of these kinds of noise transmit additional information that might detract from the message and even upset the receiver. Organizational barriers. Communication obstacles exist not just between the individuals or between the two persons, but also inside an organization. Every company, regardless of size, has its own communication strategies and must operate under its own communication environment. In a large organization where the flow of communication is downwards, feedback is not guaranteed. बॉस ने कहा आपने कर दिया या नहीं किया फीडबैक नहीं लिया ना आपने फीडबैक दिया sometimes it happens in your personal life also if you don't get the feedback you are worried what happened that means for the closure of the communication depending upon your choice feedback is must in a large organizations with a flat structure usually tends to have an intricately knit communication network. A majority of large corporations are discovering that a rigid hierarchical structure restricts communication. Everyone is afraid of interacting with your boss or your superior. And this could be any of the reasons. This is due to the multiple transfer points in these hierarchical systems, communication flow, which can cause the message to be distorted, delayed, or lost. To avoid these, there should preferably be a sender receiver contact, or the message should be transmitted with minimum transfer stations. The main organizational barriers are too many transfer stations, fear of superiors, negative tendencies, use of inappropriate media, and information overload. Too many transfer station means the same information is being transmitted to different channels. The more links there are in the communication chain, the greater are the chances of miscommunication. Imagine, for instance, that your professors ask you to convey a message to X. You, because of some inconvenience or sheer laziness, ask your friend why to do so. Now there are four people involved in the communication channel. Let us see how the message gets distorted as a result of increased number of transfer stations. Fear of superiors. Fear or of superiors hinders subordinates from speaking openly in strictly organized organizations. Some people may avoid any communication with their superior in order to avoid speaking directly to their employer. At the other extreme, there may be present all the information that they have, feeling that they may be censored for leaving out some information which may be vital in the superior's eye. Normally, we are afraid of this thing only. Then comes your negative tendency, attitude. Many organizations create work groups. While some groups are formed according to the requirements of the task on hand, such as completing a particular project work, other small groups are also formed for recreational, social, or community purposes. These groups may be formal or informal and generally consist of people with similar values, beliefs, behaviors, attitudes, and opinions. What is the use of inappropriate media? While choosing the medium for a particular occasion, the advantages, disadvantages, and potential barriers to communication must be considered. While deciding the medium, such as phones, emails, computer presentations, teleconferencing, and video conferencing, the following factors may be considered: time, type of message to be communicated, cost, and intended audience. For example, the telephone is not a good medium for delivering sensitive information. Such communications are best delivered in person or by private chat message if the receiver is in another office. For information that has to be recorded and retrieved in the future, printed letters are preferred. Since they are permanent, effective communication usually requires a combination of mediums such as email followed by phone confirmation. Information overload. One of the most serious confronting businesses today is the loss of efficiency caused by manual processing of enormous amount of data. Information overload is the term for this situation. The usual results of information overload are fatigue, disinterest, and boredom. Under these circumstances, further communication is not possible. Important and essential information is frequently mixed in with too many irrelevant data and overlooked by the receiver. To reduce information overload in an organization, screening of information is a must. Messages should be directed only to those people who are likely to benefit from the information. Now comes Unit 3, that is types of communication. Robert Burton has said that a blow with word strikes deeper than a blow with a sword. Therefore, it is important to choose our words judiciously and cautiously. as it determines the success of our communication at personal and professional level. Our personal and professional words move on the wheels of communication. A person with better communication skills achieves more success at the personal and professional level as compared to a person who has an average or below average level of these skills. Communication is essential in advising, counseling, guidance, mentoring, giving orders, delegation, giving warnings, preparing advertisement, and marketing, among others. A major part of our spoken words, that is oral communication, is supplemented by body language, gesture, sign, and expressions. And these are non-verbal communication components of communication. Verbal communication. Verbal communication is the sum total of the time spent in speaking, listening, and writing in a personal and professional capacity. We can understand verbal communication as the establishment of communication between people using oral or written words. The message is transferred from the sender to the receiver through an oral or written channel of communication. Verbal communication thus stands for both spoken and written communication. It can be one-way communication where the message flows from the sender to the receiver and nothing goes back to the sender from the receiver. Or it can be a two-way communication where the communication is negotiated between two people. The sender sends the message and the receiver responds after getting the message. What are the different types of verbal communication? Basically, verbal communication can be classified into two categories. The first one is oral communication. Second one is written communication. Oral communication is the most common and popular mode of communication in our personal and professional life. It can be formal, informal, one way or two way communication. It can involve a face to face interaction, telephonic conversation, or communication through video conferencing. In other words, it involves a speaker and a listener. The speaker and the listener may establish a one way or two way communication depending upon the settings. Oral communication can be of two types, formal or informal. If we talk about informal, this involves people speaking and listening to everyday occurrence while talking to friends, family members, or colleagues on topics not related to business or other formal situations. Informal oral communication is mostly casual in nature and is based on social relationship between the people. It is an unofficial nature and normally occurs outside the hierarchy of school, college, and businesses. As far as formal oral communication is concerned, this does not involve casual exchange of information and is governed by organizational hierarchy and the chains of the command. The flow of information which flows is controlled by strict codes, bounded by time and structure put in the place of master key. The formal communication is practiced rigorously in certain situations like interviews, oral evaluations or viva voice, lectures, debates, speeches, presentations. group discussion in a business meeting, or in our school. Formal oral communication is more reliable since it is communicated in official capacity and in most cases can be tracked back to its source. On the contrary, informal oral communication is not governed by such strict hierarchies, and normally it is not very reliable since most of it is said to be in the casual settings. The information moves freely in informal settings as compared to formal settings, where the information moves through predefined channels. Written communication, on the other hand, can be understood as the sending of messages through the written words. In this mode of communication, the sender of the message uses written mode to transfer the message. The message is communicated through letters, manuals, reports, emails, handbook, book, circulars, etc. Written communication is very effective way of communication since it involves documentation that can be preserved or can become a permanent record for future use. It is primarily a formal mode of communication, and unlike oral communication, it is not very flexible in nature. A written communication can be used as evidence in a legal scenario, and hence it is a reliable mode of communication in professional settings. The language used in this form of communication is usually formal in nature. In today's world of social media, the multimedia messaging, we use written communication in our daily lives as well as in official communication in abundance. Social media messaging and instant messaging has become an integral part of our lives. That is why we used to call it WhatsApp University. Every information, whether it is reliable or irreliable, moves on like a fire. It is important to note that regardless of the type of language used, the conversation or exchange of information in written form on these new mediums or platforms of communication can be documented and preserved for future personal, professional, legal, and other uses. Written communication has its own merits and demerits. In its formal sphere, written communication moves very slowly as compared to oral communication. The electronic or paper form of written communication is destined to a writing period, and the receiver cannot access the message spontaneously. And in the case of oral communication, oral communication does not require a person to be literate to transfer the message. Human beings are born with the ability to acquire knowledge, language, and we start speaking much earlier than we learn to write. Nonverbal communication. All forms of communication do not require a use of words in oral or written communication. In this form of communication, the speaker generally does not exchange words. However, the communication takes place through non-verbal cues. It is an important essential part of the communicative process, and various experts have opinion that it constitutes more than 50% of the communicative process. Non-verbal communication may be visual or auditory in nature. Symbols, signs, gestures, body language, facial expressions, eye contact, physical appearance may be considered as visuals, non-verbal cues. Non-verbal communication governs a major aspect of our lives. We interact with signs and symbols on a daily basis. The conversations are normally one-way communication. For example, the traffic light communicates with a very large group of commuters by guiding their movement for a swift flow of traffic and controlling probable situations of chaos. Nonverbal communication is a form of universal communication and which is not restricted by language boundaries, and the same sign and symbols can be used everywhere. These signs and symbols act as a tool to include the illiterate population in all major activities. Take an example of a football or cricket match. These matches are attended by a large number of people, and it would be impossible to communicate with the audience and convey the match proceeding. A cricket umpire takes gestures through his or her hand to inform everyone if the player is out or has scored a boundary. And a football referee uses colored flags, cards, and other gestures to communicate with the audience. These gestures and symbols are fixed and universally accepted. Now comes the advantages and disadvantages of verbal and non-verbal communication. So we will start with advantages. It is very useful for one-way communication when a person on a large group of people needs to understand a simple message quickly. Message there. It is easy to understand and people almost act instantly on specific signs and symbols. Literacy of a language is not essential in comprehending nonverbal signs and symbols, and it facilitates the case of communication. If one thing has advantage, so disadvantage will also be there. In it is only to be a one-way communication in most cases. The meaning of message is fixed and limited. People need to learn the meaning of a particular sign. Traffic signs interpreted incorrectly may result in an accident. And these signs may be interpreted incorrectly sometimes and may result in miscommunication. Types of non-verbal communication. The categorization of non-verbal form of communication is very difficult since there are number of things that come under non-verbal mode of communication. However, we can broadly categorize them. Kinesis, that is body language, facial expression, eye contact. Sign language, proximate size and chronemics, that is time and space. Paralanguage, meta-communication, haptics, and silence. These are all different types of non-verbal communication. It is somewhat how you react without speaking. Kinesis can be understood as a study of body's physical movement for the purpose of communication. In other words, we can understand it as a way our body communicates without words and using various movements of hands, facial expressions, eye contact, etc. For example, nodding of head communicates an acceptance or denial by the receiver. Parameters to understand kinesis is a better way as these parameters play an important role in the business world. First one is physical appearance. A well dressed person with appropriate accessories on him or her is considered cultured and educated, as compared to a person who deserves, who dresses to fulfill essential needs or does not have. It can be understood as the way we present ourselves. It includes the way we stand, talk, walk, sit, and hold ourselves while we move around during the process of communication. It is a variable component of communication and varies according to the circumstances we face while communicating our message. It is very important component since it speaks volume about our personality. Number three is gestures. The movement we make with our hands, heads, or face are termed as gestures. Too many or too little gestures may impede the effectiveness of the communication. Nodding our head in negation or acceptance on a viewpoint appropriately supplemented with verbal communication. But on the other hand, it may make it ineffective if used inappropriately. Number four is your facial expression. Our facial expressions are an integral part of the communication process since it expresses the intent of the speaker. We can understand the intention of the speaker by looking at the facial expressions, and hence it becomes important for the sender of the message to supplement his or her words through appropriate facial expressions. That is why we used to say, keep smiling. Fifth one is eye contact. Eye contact with the audience can change the effect of the message on the receiver. Our eye communicates in various ways. The same thing what I'm now saying. You are listening to someone and your eyes are in the sky. I don't know. And the other person may think that he is simply speaking and you are not concentrating on what the person is saying. A good eye contact with the listener or receiver of the message can make conversation more powerful. On the other hand, avoiding eye contact may result in a disinterested audience and portray the speaker as weak and not confident. Maintaining eye contact reaffirms the audience about the keenness, confidence, and willingness of the speaker to establish communication with the listener. However, looking down or looking away conveys that the speaker is shy, nervous, or disinterested in the process of communication. It's better one should have a eye to eye contact whenever you are listening or whenever you are saying something. Try to have. As far as your part is concerned, you should see in the other person's eyes. Then comes your sign language. Sign language is a highly developed system of non-verbal communication. It uses audio, visual, and audio-visual signs and symbols to communicate. We have already discussed that sign language is the most popular mode of non-verbal communication. There are universally accepted symbols and signs that are widely used in the world. However, there are culture-specific signs and symbols that can be understood differently by people from different cultures. A thumbs up is a positive sign, what we use in India, and it shows primarily to show agreement or motivate people in Western society. However, it is a sign communication in the Indian subcontinent. Sign language can also be understood, and in some cases, it is also used to supplement oral communication. In India, we use many signs which represent our culture. For example, the symbol of Om. Now see, there are three words written. Frequently used in India is known as the sound of universe. It can be Om, it can be OHM, or it can be AUM. All the three have the same sound. We can see another example. The symbol V represents different meanings in different parts of the world. Let us have a look at these meanings. USA, it represents a symbol of peace. Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and the UK. This symbol is considered sign of rudeness and defense. Proxemics. Proxemics study deals with the necessary space or distance between two people should maintain each other during a process of communication. You can understand what I mean to say right now. As the name suggests, it helps us to understand the proximity, that is, the state of being closeness to a person according to the relationship. You always speaking to your boss, to your teacher, you always maintain a distance. But while speaking to your friend, you can come as close as possible. And this is what proxemics is. It is the study of physical space between individuals. Edward T. Hall, in a study of proxemics, divides the space between two people during an interaction into four zones, depending on the relationship people share with each other. Number one is intimate. The intimate zone has the shortest distance between the people. It only extends to 45 centimeters, or approximately 1.5 feet. This space is shared by close family members like parents, spouses, and relatives. This space is also shared between very close friends and lovers. Number two is personal. The personal zone begins at 46 centimeters and ends at 120 centimeters, which is approximately 4 feet. According to Hall, this zone is shared between good friends, colleagues, classmates, and some close acquaintances. This space indicates a certain level of familiarity between people. Social. This zone of communication is mostly formal and official. It begins at a distance of 1.21 meters, which is approximately 4 feet, and ends at 3.60 meters, which is 12 feet. In this zone, we interact with people in official capacity, newly formed school or office groups, new acquaintances or strangers. Interacting with complete strangers to ask for direction or an interview is an example of communication in this zone. Normally, you don't sit. No doubt you sit in front of, but it depends upon when an interview is going on, you can be asked to sit anywhere. Number fourth is public. As the reading suggests, is related to communication in a public sphere. It starts from 3.61 meters, 12 feet, and may end at 7.2 meters, approximately 25. Hallway, classroom, lectures, seminars, training sessions are some of the examples of formal events in this zone of communication. It is very important to understand the proper zone of proxemics. That is, due to maintain proper distance during a process of communication to establish personal and social relationships. Chronomics. Thomas J. Berua, a scholar who studied nonverbal communication in detail, was the first to use the term chronomics. To explain the function of this time, in communication process. In other words, we can understand it as the study of use of time in human interaction. Time is a valuable resource, and how we use it in our daily transactions defines our behavioral pattern. We normally used to say, कर लेंगे, कौन सी जल्दी है? You are deciding it, irrespective of what, whether it has to be done right now or it can be delayed for some time. If a person is late for an interview or sends late responses to emails, then it is perceived that the person cannot use the time effectively. Normally, what we say, time chala gaya to gaya, the same thing, and create a negative impression. If a person arrives too early for an interview, it may be perceived as over eagerness of that person. Time can be monochromic or polychromic. Monochromic time system. According to Edward D. Hall, he writes that it is a part of popular business culture where time is considered money. In this time system, work is divided in small segments of time for effective scheduling, arrangements, and master purpose. Polychronic time system. In this time system is defined as multitask. Instead of small segments, time is viewed as wider, where many tasks can be done in the same time. For example, we can answer our phone while typing on our computer or taking notes. Polychronic time-oriented culture is popular in South America, Arabs, and Asian countries, where time is not divided into small segments, like monochromic societies, where time is measured as per the cultural practice. What do you do? Not everybody does. You have a phone in your hand, and on other hand, you are writing or you are doing something. Para language. This form of non-verbal communication helps us to understand things beyond speech and sign. When we answer a phone call and hear the other person saying hello, we instantly recognize the gender of the speaker and the voice if it is familiar. We can identify the person if we recognize the voice. We can also guess the state of mind of the person just by hearing the word hello. Do it today. The listeners can easily guess if the speaker is distressed or happy. The way you utter hello tells your condition. I'm not going to say it's mental condition or your physical condition, but which state you are. Haptics. We can understand it simply as a language of touch. The way we communicate through touch is one of the most basic forms of communication. An infant communicates with his or her mother or other family members primarily through touch. An adult can also understand each other by this form of communication. Touching hands, kissing, slapping, hugging, etc. can come into the category of this communication. Most important one, the silence. It may be intriguing how silence can be a medium of communication, but surprisingly, it is one of the most common form of non-verbal communication. For example, a person singing on a stage suddenly stops and becomes silent. He or she will attract the attention of all the people, including those who were not listening to him or her initially. Is that correct? We convey a lot when we are silent. So that is why we used to say one has to be a good listener. Don't argue or don't react immediately. Listen to it, analyze it, and your time will come, speak it. Silence can also be a barrier to communication. If we are silent, we are asked to answer a question or give your opinion when it may impede communication. We knew we need to use our silence judiciously to make our communication more effective. Meta communication. This form of communication mostly deals with the interpretation of the message by the receiver. The term was made popular by the English anthropologist and linguist George Beckson. He proposed that the interpretation of the message is governed by all the verbal and non-verbal components of the communicative process, along with relation between the speaker and the listener. A speaker may say something, but it may mean something very different. For example, an ironic statement like the police station got robbed not only conveys that someone has looted the police, but another group of audience will interpret it as the incompetency of the police security. This is what I told you in the beginning. Glass is half filled or half empty. Your choice. They may not be able to defend themselves. How do we expect them to protect the general public? However, such an interpretation has its own limitations. The audience needs to have the competencies to understand the irony of the sentence. We have completed with this 3 units. Any questions from any one of you? Any questions from anyone?
No,
Like
sir, it was clear.
just now we had a discussion on communication. You cannot. That means if you are not responding, that means you are just showing me your presence, but you are mentally somewhere else. You might have heard something new today, or you were aware of it. Some words, some system.
Yes, sir.
Any question from anyone, or we meet again after some time. We have 2 sessions today.
Sir, no question, sir. We can meet after the break. Sir, can we
Okay.
get the PPT, sir?
How you will get? I
We are
don't know.
having a common WhatsApp group, sir. You can share there.
Okay.
Uh, both quantitative stats and this one both are good, sir. I think if we prepare using the PPT, we can get the pass mark easily.
You
So
want
I
only
see that.
I don't accept what you said right now. And after interacting with me, pass mark doesn't mean anything.
Yes, sir. Actually, we'll get good marks only, sir. Your teaching is so good, sir. Actually, we got some confidence in both the subjects. Communication is at least theoretical. We were able to pass, but 005, your teaching was very useful, sir. We got good confidence with the PPT and also your teaching. So you can, if you can share the PPT, it will be of great help, sir. For us.
Okay, I will try to do that. Your paper is on 29th,
29th,
21st.
yes, sir. 29th, yes.
29th is your paper.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we will meet after the break.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, man.